It's not often that a world-class athlete, once celebrated on football's biggest stages, finds himself entangled in a story so bizarre, so layered in tragedy and absurdity, that it feels lifted from the pages of a crime novel. Yet here we are, following the dizzying, almost surreal descent of Paul Pogba, a man who once ruled the footballing world and now finds himself battling the fallout of a family betrayal of operatic proportions.
Can break up a family, can create a war, can create everything, man. Sometimes I was just by myself thinking.
To begin this tale, we must return to the gritty Parisian suburb of Roissy-en-Brie, where Pogba and his brothers, Matthias and Florentin, were raised by their indefatigable mother, Yeo. Paul often describes her as the cornerstone of his life, a woman who toiled endlessly to provide her sons with opportunities in a world that offered little. "She's my first girlfriend," Paul once quipped, with an affection that made it clear how deep their bond ran.
Go, you will play somewhere else, they will see. But my mother always told me, you will go somewhere, but you will come back here.
In a neighborhood where prospects were slim and temptations abundant, football was Paul's lifeline, a way out. While Paul's meteoric rise to stardom is well documented, a path that saw him crowned a World Cup champion in 2018 and sign a then record-breaking transfer to Manchester United, Matthias's trajectory went in the opposite direction. A talented footballer in his youth, Matthias never quite found his footing. He became the quintessential journeyman, hopping between lower league clubs, often leaving under a cloud of unmet expectations. It's easy to imagine how bitterness might fester in the shadow of a brother whose fame and fortune seemed limitless. By 2016, Paul was riding high. Leading France to the final of the European Championship, he was hailed as a generational talent, a maestro in midfield. Manchester United shelled out a world record €105 million to bring him back to Old Trafford, and the move was heralded as a homecoming for the ages. Off the pitch, he embraced a lifestyle befitting his status, dating a global pop star and reportedly indulging in, shall we say, spirited hotel escapades that became legendary among the staff at Manchester's Lowry Hotel. Meanwhile, Matthias's career hit yet another stumbling block, released by Partick Thistle, a club whose claim to fame is that it exists. The disparity between their lives grew starker still after the 2018 World Cup, when Paul lifted the most coveted trophy in football. As the confetti rained down in Moscow, he was not just a hero to France but a symbol of possibility for young footballers across the globe. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming in the Pogba family. Paul had always been generous, sending money home to support Matthias and their childhood friends. Yet as the years passed and the handouts turned into expectations, he began to pull back. It wasn't just financial strain, it was about boundaries. What had once been gifts were now demands, and when Paul said no, the anger boiled over. By 2022, the tensions had reached breaking point. On a dark night in March, Paul was lured to an apartment in Paris by individuals he had known for years, people he considered family, if not by blood, then by history. The reunion quickly turned sinister. Assault rifles were brandished, demands were made. Paul found himself face to face with a chilling ultimatum: pay €13 million for so-called protection services, or face the consequences. The figure wasn't plucked out of thin air.
Matthias Pogba, the brother of World Cup champion Paul Pogba, left a Paris courthouse on Tuesday evening.
It was apparently calculated as $1 million per year for the 13 years they claimed to have safeguarded him. "They put the guns to my head," Paul would later recount, a sentence that still feels jarring in its bluntness. Under duress, he handed over $100,000 and provided access to his credit card, which his captors used to rack up a €57,000 bill at Adidas. Yet even this wasn't enough to satisfy their demands. The group wanted the full amount, and they weren't going to back down. This might have been a story of faceless criminals, the sort of cautionary tale footballers are warned about in those mandatory workshops on managing fame. But what made this saga truly horrifying was the involvement of Matthias Pogba.
The trial will resume on Wednesday, with the defence case due to be heard on Thursday.
While not physically present during the kidnapping, Matthias's role in the extortion plot became increasingly clear. He wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating it. When Paul refused to capitulate, Matthias escalated matters in a way that was as audacious as it was absurd. In August 2022, he released a video promising to reveal explosive truths about his younger brother. The allegations were wild, even by the standards of tabloid fodder. Matthias claimed that Paul had hired a witch doctor to cast spells on his teammates, including Kylian Mbappé. He spent millions on curses, Matthias said, delivering his lines with the gravity of a man convinced he was exposing some great conspiracy. Among the accusations was the utterly baffling claim that Paul's supposed sorcery had summoned a plague of butterflies to the Euro 2016 final. That the butterflies turned out to be moths only added to the farce. For Paul, the public airing of these allegations wasn't just humiliating, it was a deeply personal betrayal. This wasn't some tabloid reporter digging for dirt, this was his brother, his flesh and blood, turning their private life into a grotesque spectacle. And for what? To exert pressure, to squeeze more money out of him. If Matthias's goal was to embarrass Paul into compliance, it failed spectacularly. Instead, it galvanized public sympathy for Paul and turned Matthias into a figure of ridicule.
Super excited, joyous, emotional, and everything that goes with it.
By the time the case reached court in late 2024, the story had grown even darker. Matthias and 5 accomplices stood trial for extortion and criminal conspiracy. Among them was Rushdane K, the alleged ringleader, who claimed they had been coerced into the plot by shadowy figures too dangerous to name. His testimony was theatrical, complete with a scar he claimed was from a gunshot wound inflicted by these unnamed men. The courtroom was a circus of drama. At one point, a woman in the gallery screamed that these mysterious figures were outside the courthouse, watching. Another defendant was found sobbing in a corridor, face down and wailing like a man whose world had collapsed. The verdict was damning. Matthias received a 3-year sentence, with 2 years suspended, meaning he will serve the remainder under house arrest. His accomplices faced harsher punishments, with sentences ranging from 4 to 8 years. For Matthias, the sentence feels almost symbolic, a final tragic punctuation mark on the disintegration of a once close bond. As for Paul, the ordeal has left deep scars. The extortion attempt, coupled with the public airing of his family's dirty laundry, pushed him to the brink. In 2023, he admitted he had considered retiring from football altogether, a startling confession from a player still in his prime. Just when he seemed ready to move on, another blow landed, an 18-month ban for a doping violation. Juventus promptly terminated his contract, leaving him adrift, a free agent in every sense of the term. It's tempting to view the Pogba saga as a morality play, a cautionary tale about the perils of fame, the corrosive effects of money, and the betrayal that sometimes comes from those closest to us. But that would be too neat, too reductive. This is a story about family, about the ties that bind and the wounds they can inflict. It's about a man who reached the pinnacle of his sport, only to find himself dragged down by those he thought he could trust. For Paul Pogba, the road ahead is uncertain. He will undoubtedly return to football. His talent is too great to be ignored. But the question remains, how do you move forward when your own blood has turned against you? Perhaps there are no answers, only the quiet hope that time, as it so often does, will dull the pain. For now, Pogba must navigate the wreckage of his life, one careful step at a time.